Joining us this week for the Wednesday Bookmark is Niki Hardy. Niki has exited corporate life. She's been to seminary, moved continents, planted churches, started businesses and nonprofits. She's also navigated loss, cancer, and church hurt. She lives in North Carolina. We're going to talk this morning about her book, God, Can We Chat? A daringly honest guide to growing closer to God, one doubt at a time. Niki, thanks so much for your time this morning.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
You dispel a common myth right within the first few pages of this book, namely the notion that we have that doubts plus thinking will equal clarity. But why isn't that true? It feels like we should be able to figure things out if we do enough thinking, right?
Well, it's true. I think we think that because it's true in so many other areas of our lives. When we find ourselves unsure which path to take, what decision to make, we can normally think it through. But when it comes to things of faith, and especially things of God, we are living with this kind of tension, if you like, where we have a God that is knowable and we can get to meet him and have a personal relationship with him. But at the same time, he's completely unknowable and his ways are not our ways and all that jazz. And so we find ourselves in this place where we can't think our way to certainty when it comes to God. There is an element of mystery, and it can be really hard for us that are black and white thinkers who like to find clarity and certainty and know that we know that we know, to realize that actually there's a level of unknowability about God.
Your dad had and has a lot of quips and quotes, as you call them, as many dads do, I think. And one thing that he used to say as you were growing up was, when you get to the fork in the road, ignore it, which is an interesting thing to say. What does that mean, Niki, and how does it tie in with this book?
Well, for the longest time, it was the most annoying thing he would say, because, of course, I'd be like, but Dad, I can't ignore the fork in the road. You know, there's two paths and I've got to choose one of them because I don't want to go back the way I came. But really what he was saying was look for another way. Look for a path that might be hidden. And when it came to my relationship with God and everything God, faith, church, as I now have this new collective noun, I got to the crossroads of doubt and faith. And I looked down the path of doubt and I thought, well, I don't really want to go down there, because what if I start losing my faith even more? What if I slowly fade away, or that it all crumbles completely? So my faith is precious and I don't want to go down there. But then I looked down the faith path and I thought, well, I don't know whether I have enough faith to go down there. And the things that I see down there, I'm not sure I can subscribe to them or want to be part of. And so I thought, what on earth do I do? So I ignored the fork in the road, the crossroads, if you like. And I just sat down and said, God, can we chat? Because I don't want to lose my faith, but I'm worried my doubts are my faith's greatest weakness.
You make an interesting point regarding a hidden danger that is perhaps a bit sneakily inherent in our quest for certainty, and namely that's the loss of curiosity. Speak to that tension between knowledge and curiosity.
Yes, I think it's great to have a passion and a desire to get to know God better, to read his word and to find out more about his character and the ways he works and the ways he speaks and the ways he wants to transform us. But also there's a great intimacy in staying curious about the things that we can't figure out. And what I realized in my journey with doubts and faith and God and my relationship with him, which I don't think will ever be over. It's not like I used to doubt and now I'm absolutely fine, is that actually our questions and our doubts can become our faith's superpower, not its kryptonite, that they can become our faith's greatest strength When we worry, they're its greatest weakness. And so when we sit in that posture of curiosity, these questions, rather than filling us with dread, can fill us with hope and excitement and a desire to know more, but also walk in mystery.
Yeah, and not to put too fine a point on that, but you take on this lie that we have to choose between faith and doubt. Like, why isn't that true?
Well, I think this side of heaven, we're never going to know the mind of God. And probably when we're, all with our lovely halos and celestial harps, we won't either.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we have to walk with God and live in that tension of mystery and being okay with not knowing everything about God and why he acts the way he does. And sometimes we get a little sense of why things happen the way they do or what's going on. But one thing we can always do is keep leaning into him, keep chatting with him, keep dialoguing with him, however angry or sad or bitter that gets. It's just really important to keep leaning into him instead of turning away.
Mm. In the last section of this book, you openly chat with God on some very specific doubts. One being God, you feel so far away. What would you say to that person who feels right now like their prayers, whatever those prayers happen to be about, are just bouncing off the ceiling?
Yeah, it's such a difficult place to be in. And to that person, I would say, first of all, I'm so sorry. I know it's such a difficult season, a difficult place where you feel like God's on mute or he's just ignoring you and he feels so far away. We want to not just feel him and know him in our heads, but we want to know him and feel him in our hearts. So it is really, really tough when we find ourselves in that place. And I would recommend, I'm not going to give some Christian platitude about, well, we know that he's close and I want to tell you he's close. But I would encourage that person to remember and think about the last time they felt close to God. Was it in nature, looking at a beautiful view? Was it playing with their grandchildren? Was it in deep conversation with someone? When was the last time you felt close to God? Maybe it was in church, in worship, wherever it was. And can you kind of put yourself in the path of God's presence again and go to those places where he speaks most readily to you? If you're a person who is very artistic, maybe it's in art. Maybe if you're a nature person, it's in nature. Maybe if you're a patterns and numbers person, it's through spreadsheets or something like that. But we can all hear the voice of God because we are his sheep and he is our shepherd. But we all hear in different ways. So I would encourage that person to keep listening and keep tuning in and keep remembering how they have heard him and felt him in the past.
Things like worry and anxiety also seem to be very common struggles in Christian circles. But shouldn't faith work as an antidote of sorts to worry? Why do we still wrestle so much, do you think, in the faith-based community with things like worry?
I think that's a really good question because we do kind of take on this understanding that we shouldn't worry anymore because God's love, perfect love, casts out fear. So we shouldn't worry anymore. But the truth is, God created us to worry. He gave us this flight or fight response. He created us to know when we're in danger. The trouble is we stay there. That's the problem. But he also equipped us with a calm response, a parasympathetic nervous response that will counteract that. So when we feel afraid, it's what we do with it. When we feel ourselves worried, it's can we tap into all those things God gave us to calm that adrenaline that's pumping through us, to calm our racing heart. And what I like to do, and I actually have a course called the Worry Course, not to teach people how to worry better, but actually to help people in this, because what we can do is we can combine both, things like breath prayer and scriptures into all the scientific research and practices that help us kick into practice that calming response, whether it's different breathing or different exercises. And so I think there's a misunderstanding that we shouldn't ever worry, but we shouldn't stay there. And God gave us what we need to get out of that constant worry.
There's so much more in the book. We're just touching on the surface of it here. But again, it's called God Can We Chat? A daringly honest guide to growing closer to God, one doubt at a time. Niki Hardy, our guest this week for the Wednesday Bookmark. Really thoughtful stuff. Thanks so much, Niki.
You're welcome. It's great to be here.